Hello and welcome to Unit 7. In Unit 7, we are going to learn more about JavaScript and we are going to start off with variables. So if you could open up your Do Now Pop code, take a look at this sample Instagram. You can see that there's lots of different types of information in this Instagram post. You can see that if you change this cute dog to your name, I'm going to change it to my name, that it shows up on the screen in one place, in three different places, which is pretty cool because I only wrote one line of code. All right, so you can answer the question what you think the code is doing and submit this in Google Classroom. Pause your video if you need to, and then we'll get started. So if you think about an app like Instagram, Instagram is going to use JavaScript variables to store information. Some information that might be used more than once could be your username, it could be your location, it could be your number of followers, likes, hashtags. All of this is information that Instagram or other apps on the internet might want to use variables in order to store. Today, we're going to learn how to create new variables, how to store information in them, and how to read their value. So as we move into Unit 7, I want to remind you that everything that you learned in Unit 6, which was jQuery, is a part of JavaScript. I know we went over this in the beginning of Unit 6, but just as a reminder, jQuery is a part of JavaScript. It's a library, and it's the most popular JavaScript library right now, which is why we want you to learn it so that when you go into a tech career, you know different parts of JavaScript. So everything that we wrote in jQuery can actually also be taught in plain JavaScript, which means without that library. So if you took that library out, you could still write the same thing. You could still make click handlers. You could still do everything with hide and show and everything, but it looks different. So if you take a look at these pictures at the bottom, here, this looks familiar, what we did with jQuery. Here's what it would look like with JavaScript, so you can see it's a little bit longer. All right, so we're going to learn some JavaScript, which again, jQuery is part of. We're going to put some jQuery in our JavaScript. We're going to be writing in the same box, but we are learning JavaScript now. All right, and so we're starting with variables. So what is a variable? It's like the box or container that stores the information, right? And that stored information is called a value. So when we create the variables, we can manipulate their values using JavaScript, and we can use that stored information in our website the same way that the do now that we had took that information that I put in of my name and they put it on the website. So the variable itself is the box. All right, it can hold everything or anything that we want it to hold, but we just think about the box itself. So if you can take a look at the box on the right, that box is named my box. All right, and if we think about how variables can be useful on a website, I kind of pointed this out before, that we want to use variables when we want to use the same information over and over again, right? I only wrote my name once, showed up on the website 3 times. If you think about Facebook, if you think about your email, if you think about anything where your name shows up multiple times, your name's probably stored in a variable, all right? And you can think about other information that might be stored multiple times as well. All right, so if the variable itself is the box, and we can give the box a name, in this case, we have a box called my box, and the value of my box is what's inside of it, which is the marker. All right, so in this case, you can see it says my box equals marker. All right, what about now? Now I see the same box, right? We're not changing that, but we are taking the marker out, and we're going to put a crayon in, so my box equals crayon. All right, my box is the variable, the value is crayon. And now we are taking out the crayon and we're putting in the number 5. So now again, the box has not changed, still my box, but it equals 5 now. All right, if we take a look at these silly pictures, what's the variable in each picture? All right, the one on the left, the variable is the blue suitcase. The one on the right, the variable is that red box with the bunnies on it. The value of each variable, first it's empty, and then you see the dog in that blue suitcase, and then in the red box, you see the cat. All right, so before we store things in the variable, we have to create it, right? We can't store things in something that doesn't exist. So you must declare the variable in order to use it first. And in order to declare variables, we use the keyword let. So you have to write the word let in order to create a new variable. And that's how JavaScript knows that you've created a new variable. All right, so one, we declare it. If you take a look at this variable declaration, we have let my box. It's kind of like let it exist. All right. Notice that it's got a semicolon at the end of it. That would be the end of your line there. All right. When we name a variable, we want to make sure it's something that makes sense. We don't just want to call it variable name 1, variable name 2, variable name 3 if you have 3 variables. We want to make sure that somebody else reading your code is going to know what it is. All right, so if you want to store inside of it the number of students, then we would call it 16. If we want it to be, or then we would put the value 16 inside of it, we'd call it number of students. Average GPA, enemy, you could call it name, whatever you are actually going to do with your variable is what you want to call it, all right? And then the only thing that we have limitations on is we don't want variable names to start with a number, all right? So you can't call it something that starts with a number, and you can't use keywords. So you cannot call your variable let because let is the keyword. If you're asking what keywords are, there are special JavaScript words that already have some sort of function for it, some sort of functionality, which means that you can't use them for other things. If you take a look at the colors in pop code, you can tell which words have meaning. And because let is purple, it's a keyword. Anything that you see in purple is going to be a keyword. All right, after you declare your variable, you next want to assign the value to the variable, which is when you would give it what is inside of it. All right, so we see let my box, semicolon, and then my box equals 8, which means you assign the value 8 to the variable my box. All right, if we change it, we can take out 8, we can put in 300. Whichever value is stored in the variable last is going to be the current value. This goes, the code is read in order from top to bottom, which is not always the case, but is the case for variables. So you've got to be careful the order that you write your code in. All right, if you take a look at this, there's an error in the code. If I read the error, it says on line 2, you already declared my box somewhere else. If you take a look at it, line 1 says let my box. Line 2 says let my box equals treasure. Notice that we have the keyword twice. In order to fix this, we would have to take out that second let. We don't need let twice. So if you take a look at this, see how let is only once, and then we just see my box without that keyword. You can only create the box once. Then you can use it as many times as you want, but you can only use the word let once. All right, you can also do this all on the same line. So you can do this in 2 lines where you have let cake and then cake equals lemon, or you can just say let cake equals lemon. Both of these are exactly the same. There is not one that's better than the other. It's kind of just personal preference. All right, a few more lightning questions, and then we'll get into the guided practice. The name of this variable, high score, the initial value, 20. All right, what is going to display on this page? Well, I have this variable called high score, and it is equal to the value of 20. So if I make high score show up on the screen, right? Because right now it says the text that's in high score is going to show up in the body of my screen. What's going to show up on the page is the number 20. All right, how about now? Well, I'm still putting the value of high score on the page, but first I declare it to 20, and then I change the high score to 25, so I'd have 25 in this case. Again, we're getting a little complicated here. We've got 2 different variables here. We've got high score, which is equal to 20, and then we have new score, which is equal to 30. All right, we're only displaying high score on the screen, but right here in this 3rd line, I make it so that high score is equal to new score, which means I have high score is equal to 30, and 30 is going to show up on the screen. All right, if you're feeling a little weird about this, you can type these exact 4 lines into your pop code. Check it out, see what happens. All right, one more time. What's going to display on the page? This is a tricky one. You would think that it's going to be the number 20, but actually, if you take a look at these quotes around high score, actually what would display on the page is the word high score. Notice in all the other ones, we don't use quotes. All right, we do not put variables in quotes. All right, that's probably the biggest mistake that I personally make, and it's something that you have to think about every time you use variables. All right, variables do not go in quotes, only strings go in quotes. All right, one last thing to remember. If you take a look at what's wrong with this, if you type this into your pop code, you're going to get an error message. And the reason why is because you see this capital V for value. See, this is a lowercase v. Second biggest mistake I make in my code is typos, either spelling something wrong or having a capital letter or not a capital letter. This is called camel case. We often do this, like kind of like a camel's got a hump in the middle. All right, we make it so that it's easy for people to read if we have two different words smushed together, mystery value, but then we got to make sure we always use camel case for the rest of the time we use it. All right, and then one last time, if we think about why variables are useful, we got to remember that it's going to make our code less repetitive. So let's take a look and do some practice. All right, so if we take a look at this, notice that we've got a shopping list. We've got, hello, Megan. What do you want to shop for today, Megan? Go to Megan's past orders. More recommendations for Megan. Listen, y'all, my name is not Megan. All right, so I want this shopping cart to let me know what my shopping list is. So remember, I said we got to read from top to bottom. So I'm actually going to start at the top up here. All right, and it says first I need to declare a variable to hold the customer's name. So I'm going to say let to declare the variable. All right, and if I want to store the customer's name, I'm going to call this customer name. All right, notice I use that camel case again. You could just call this name if you want. You could call it person's name. You could call it shopper's name, but I'm going to call it customer name. All right, it says next, let's give that variable a value. Choose a value. All right, so let's say customer name equals Emily. Okay, that looks good, but it still says Megan here. All right, so if I take a look at this .text, it says Megan lots of times. All right, it says, let's add the variable to all the elements with class name. All right, so all these classes are named. So I'm going to change this. And I'm not going to write Emily in quotes. All right, I could write Emily in quotes here, but all this does is change it here and not everywhere. I want this to say customer name. All right, and then I'm going to change this to customer name. I'm going to change this to customer name, and then I'm going to change this to customer name, because then if I want to put somebody else's name in here, let's say I want to put Jessica in here, or I want to put Andrew in here. Whoops. I have changed all of the names just in one. All right, and I didn't have to change it all here. All right. All right, so if we head back now, it is time for your independent practice. The independent practice today is pretty cool. It's to create a basketball score counter. All right, if you open up this pop code, what you'll see is a lot of directions. All right, and I will tell you that it is very important for you to follow the directions for this one, especially in terms of naming. All right, the first thing that you need to do is declare two variables called team1 name and team2 name, and they've got to have the correct capitalization. If you don't use the correct capitalization, then it's not going to work and your code's going to be messed up and you're going to be very confused. All right, so make sure that you follow the directions and you spell everything correctly. Make sure you use quotes when it tells you to use quotes. All right, and at the end of this, you should have two teams, and it should be when you click the button, it'll tell you how many points you have. All right, if it says NaN, NaN is JavaScript fancy word for not a number. That means you've got something wrong with your code. All right, but what I really want it to be is by the time you turn this in, when you click 2 points, this is going to say 2. If I click 2 again, it'll say 4. If I click 2 again, it'll say 6. And then 3 points will add 3 points, and free throw will add 1 point. All right, so finish this up, create your snapshot, submit this. Or if you have problems with this, talk to your program manager. Remember, this is the beginning of a brand new unit. Totally fine if you're having issues. Make sure you reach out if you need help. This is a super important skill for us to learn. It's really cool that we're getting into variables, and I am super excited to see y'all's basketball score counters and what you come up with next.